So it's just past 15 hours GMT and 6 p.m. in Moscow, where investigators say they have officially confirmed that Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin is dead. 7 passengers and 3 crew members on board the executive jet that crashed on Wednesday had been identified through genetic tests. The statement by Russian authorities comes after days of speculation and rumors about the fate of Prigozhin. Once a close ally of President Vladimir Putin, he led a failed mutiny against the military leadership in Moscow 2 months ago. Dorsa Jabari begins our coverage now from Moscow.
The confirmation the world was waiting for. The official announcement of the identities of the 7 passengers and 3 crew members killed in the plane crash on Wednesday evening. Russia's Investigative Committee says the names of the passengers on the flight manifest match the bodies recovered from the crash site.
Molecular genetic examinations have been completed as part of the criminal case of the airplane crash in the Tver region. According to the results, the identities of all 10 victims have been established. They correspond with the list stated in the flight manifest.
Meanwhile, on the streets of the capital, mixed reaction to the news of the plane crash.
Yes, it's good, because traitors end up like that. We don't feel sorry for traitors.
Of course it's a pity. He was a hero of Russia. It's always a pity to lose such people.
I think it is a tragedy, a human tragedy and a tragedy for society. He was a cult figure. People knew about him.
Many ordinary Russians have paid spontaneous tribute to Prigozhin. Memorials like these have been popping up across Russia. This is the Church of St. Maxim the Confessor in the heart of the capital. It's been turned into a makeshift memorial site for the members of Wagner Group who died in the plane crash. This is both a testament to the popularity of Yevgeny Prigozhin and a message to officials that despite efforts to downplay the importance of his death, his legacy will continue to live on. As many questions remain unanswered, not only about his death, but also about the future of one of the most notorious mercenary groups in the world. Dorsa Jabari, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
All right, let's get more analysis from Al Jazeera's Dorsa Jabari, who's live for us, joins us live now. Dorsa, what happens next then?
Well, Nick, there's still a lot of questions that remain unanswered, even though this verification has been important. The confirmation that Yevgeny Prigozhin was on board that flight that went down in Tver region, about 300 kilometers north of Moscow on Wednesday evening. We still don't know what caused the crash. The investigation continues into the reason the plane went down. And also, we're waiting to find out about what will happen around the funeral of Yevgeny Prigozhin and his right-hand man, Dmitry Utkin, who was on board that plane as well. It's very important to point out that the Russian President Vladimir Putin talked about his relationship with Yevgeny Prigozhin on Thursday, where he mentioned the two men have known each other since the early 1990s. And when the spokesperson for the Kremlin was asked, Dmitry Peskov, on Friday about whether or not Vladimir Putin would attend the funeral of Prigozhin, Peskov said, well, the president has a very full schedule, and it's still unclear whether or not he would be able to attend. And we still don't know whether his family would have a public funeral or a private one. That's still something we're waiting to find out. The other important thing is we are waiting to hear more from the PMC Wagner Group itself. The mercenary group has been meeting, we understand, having a number of high-level meetings about making decisions about the future of the organization and the power structure that will follow Prigozhin's death. So even though this news is important, I think we still have a lot of questions that remain unanswered for now.
All right, Dorsa, thanks for that. Dorsa Jabari there in Moscow. So let's take a closer look at the Embraer 135 flight that crashed on Wednesday. 7 passengers and 3 crew members were on board the executive jet, and they included Yevgeny Prigozhin himself, the head of Wagner Group, and Dmitry Utkin. Dorsa was just talking about him, his close ally and co-founder. His call sign, Wagner, gave the group its name. And then there was Valery Chekolov, a senior deputy of Prigozhin, who was in charge of Wagner's logistics. Let's take this on. Lots of questions posed. Peter Elstoff joins us now from North Carolina. He's associate professor at the U.S. National Defense University. Peter, great to have you with us. First up, the question we have to ask, I think, is does this actually end all speculation about Prigozhin's death, or is the book in any way still open?
Well, if you look at some of the channels, Telegram channels, there's a lot of conspiracy that he is alive, and that just shows how popular he is, and he's becoming this like kind of iconic hero for a lot of his followers. There are some conspiracy stories that he's been recently seen in Mali, and the photos of him posted where allegedly African leaders thank him for saving democracy in Central African Republic. But I mean, he's clearly dead, and it's clearly an assassination because Putin could not tolerate him. I mean, this was an incredible embarrassment for him to see that rebellion. There are also sentiments in some Telegram channels that he shouldn't have stopped on his path to Moscow. So he's definitely becoming a heroic figure. And the big question is whether the Wagner group will accept a new command, because they will have to send someone, put someone in charge of the Wagner group.
And that's the thing, isn't it? So he's clearly dead, you say. What happens to Wagner now? Because if he's dead and Dmitry Utkin is number 2 is dead, Prigozhin's right-hand man, who fills that void?
Well, we don't know, but Putin will have to take care of that. And that person, of course, will have to be under the command of General Gerasimov and Shoigu, the Minister of Defense. Putin is not going to let anymore to have that autonomy for the Wagner group. But the question is, of course, will they agree to that? Because there is a force of tens of thousands, very well armed and trained men with a criminal background. Most of them come from prisons, particularly most recently. So it's a very big question whether they're gonna actually be integrated into the Russian military machine, or they're gonna maintain some independence, and that poses a huge problem for Putin.
And if they are integrated into the Russian military machine, what does that mean for Russia's ventures in places like Africa, in West Africa and so forth? Because then, in theory, you'd actually have Russia itself, not a mercenary army, fighting on the ground in Africa.
Well, it is a mercenary army, but they're not like a terrorist group, because they are actually a mercenary army under the command of Putin. So there is no dissent. They can make their own decisions. And what happened, they started doing it. Prigozhin started thinking of himself as an actual commander who could have his own agenda. And that's what cannot be tolerated by Putin. But again, the question is that whether he will be able to subdue them.
So, Peter, just what kind of, you talk about the mood that there has been in terms of the response on Telegram and so forth. What else has been said?
Well, they are praising him. They are portraying him as a hero. There are some quotes assigned to him. I don't know if it's true. I wasn't able to reaffirm that. Or, for example, there is an alleged quote from Prigozhin where he says that Russia is on the edge of a catastrophe, of basically disintegration, and he's seen like a person who could save Russia. So it's clearly no one is praising Gerasimov or Shoigu. They are not portrayed as heroes on those channels. So he's seen as a hero. Like, for example, he's also quoted as as a savior of democracy, as I said, in Central or African Republic. He's also shown and been quoted as he says the president is mistaken. We are not traitors, we are heroes, and we are patriots. So this is a general mood. There is not a word of criticism. Of course, these channels could be attributed to different players. I think the FSB may be involved, the Ukrainians may be involved. So it's difficult to determine who stands behind all of those channels, but they definitely do present a big problem for Putin.
Do you think Putin is now in a stronger position because of Prigozhin's demise?
No, definitely not, because there could be another Prigozhin coming. And also, if you look at the morale of the Russian army, it's not good. There's been suicides among some officers, and probably some more honest suicides, because this war is a disaster. And what the most humiliating thing for Putin, that Prigozhin actually said during his mutiny that the war was useless. He actually undermined the entire cause of the war. He said that the war was not fought the right way, that it was fought for wrong causes, and basically that was the biggest humiliation for Putin. And I don't think that those soldiers in the Wagner group, the mercenaries, they don't seem to me to have that deep allegiance to the Kremlin. That's the most dangerous thing for them. There could be another Prigozhin coming out of there.
Peter Eltsov, just great to get your perspective on this. We do appreciate that. Thanks very much indeed. Joining us there from North Carolina.